1. Solar rays reach the surface without meaning. Depending on the day, the observer melts exactly where the sun rises. The heavy sun tethers to hangers-on, throws them counterclockwise. The northern axis points in the direction. No one yields. Colors desaturate in the dark.
I'm Sarah Rara. I'm an artist, and I'm currently artist in residence at the Dickinson Fly Lab at Caltech. And I was invited by Fulcrum Arts as part of the AxS Incubator project. And I've been in residence for about 3 months. So a little bit about my work. I work mainly in video, performance, and sound, mostly time-based media. But I'm also very fluid in terms of media. I feel like I'm always exploring something new. And this lab in particular uses a lot of video environments in studying fruit fly behavior. So it's been a really nice fit to see how the scientists here are creating videos for the audience of a fruit fly and how that approach is different and how they're complementary in a way to things I experiment with in my studio. I've always been interested in the natural world and in different kinds of observation and attention and ways of observing the world around us. So getting a new perspective on that and being around scientists in the scientific community, for me it gives a lot of inspiration and also a kind of new vision, a new way of looking at things.
My name is Dr. Isabel. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in the Dickinson lab at Caltech. And here we are really interested in questions about how fruit flies navigate through the world and how their nervous system allows them to perform complex behaviors. So my research project is examining how fruit flies use the position of the sun to navigate. We've known for many years that a lot of insects can use things such as the position of the sun or moon, or even patterns in the sky, color gradients, to navigate throughout the world. And most people don't really think of a fruit fly that's just buzzing around your bananas as something that needs to travel long distances. So we use basically something called a flight arena, which essentially you can think of as a video game for the fly. So the fly is glued to a very, very tiny pin and placed in the arena, and we can present a variety of visual stimuli. In this case, I simulate the sun with just a single small green dot, and the fly actually can control the position of this dot based on her wing movements. And this allows us to essentially sort of tap into trying to understand what behavior the fly is trying to perform and how the fly is responding to this stimulus.
What I'm doing is gathering information and becoming more fluent in this way of seeing and constructing experiments, and also the language and the literature around the fruit fly, which has this enormous history of research behind it. So each day I'll come to the lab and I'll sit next to a scientist as they're doing an experiment, and we'll just talk. And I'll take notes, and then I'll often follow up by reading things they mentioned and kind of combing through articles to try to better understand some of the behaviors that I'm observing here. And then I return to my studio and I take notes and I kind of write down the impressions from that day and keep an ongoing log because I really want to remember in detail all of the things that I've seen here, because I know that they will enter my work at some point. I'm just not sure how.
5. Off-screen voices. The image subject. The camera sensor. The screen. The projector. are all involved in a performance of translation, writing, reading, and appearing. Mirroring the process of eating the sun, light converted into heat. This is a process that can move in two directions. Forward.
When a hungry fly encounters a piece of food in its environment, it'll start by eating a little bit of this food. But interestingly, it will also leave the food and come back over and over again in this stereotyped way. So these departures and returns form this fly dance in which the fly can walk away from the food but remember its location. And what's interesting about this is that it can do this in the dark. So our question is, how can a fly know its position relative to food without any visual cues? In my setup, what we do is, instead of placing a piece of food in the arena where the fly can wander around and find food, instead of actual food, we place a fictive piece of food. So such that when the fly walks in a particular place in the arena, it will receive a stimulus of light. And these are transgenic flies, and this stimulus of light actually activates a neuron in its mouth that makes it feel like it's tasting sugar. And so by activating these neurons in its mouth that taste like sugar, we can actually elicit a dance behavior just like as if it found real food. Having accomplished this, we can now presumably go on to transfer this experiment to be under a microscope where the fly is fixed, and we can be monitoring the activity of neurons while it's dancing, and ask the question, how are neurons encoding its position in space relative to food?
One thing I've kind of learned is not to treat the fruit fly as a model to extrapolate something about a human, but to treat it really as a model for a fruit fly, and to really try to delve into that and into understanding that on its own terms. Even though they are so much smaller than we are and have 100,000 neurons compared to our 100 billion, they have one of the fastest visual systems on the planet. So they can see many, many times faster than a human being. So one of the classic examples that was told to me when I first started coming to the lab is that if I were to go to the movies with a fruit fly, I would see a continuous moving image, but a fruit fly would see basically a slideshow because their vision is so fast. So as a video artist, I'm very conscious of 24 frames per second, 29, 30, 60 frames per second, and the kind of different feelings that those frame rates have. So thinking about experiencing the world and having an optic flow that's just so much faster is such an interesting thought experiment, and interesting to think about dividing time into finer and finer units. And I think as an artist, a lot of my work is manipulating time and distorting time. So really acknowledging that time feels elastic and it's experienced with some elasticity. And then thinking about other organisms and their eye-brain connection and how it creates this whole other kind of temporal dimension and way of seeing. So that's one really interesting thing about being here, is trying to imagine that kind of vision.